Part 10. Some practical points. We desire now to call your attention to several common sense, practical general points which should prove useful and helpful to you in the task of making up your mind concerning various subjects and questions toward which you have directed your reasoning powers and logical thought. Some of these have been expressly stated or else implied in some part of the foregoing instruction. Others arise from the experience of men in applying the principles which have been presented to you in these pages. In either case, the present reference is intended to be merely suggestive, not a detailed exposition. Point I. All logical argument, reasoning, or proof must begin with something necessarily taken for granted, admitted or accepted as self-evident and axiomatic, or else assumed for the sake of the argument, and accepted tentatively in order to permit the argument, discussion or reasoning to begin. Without such a starting point, there can be no reasoning, argument or discussion on any subject whatsoever. An effort to find the ultimate and fundamental proof, fact or truth in any case will be endless, for the chain must be endless so far as we are concerned, inasmuch as there is a limit to our respective lives, while there is apparently no limit to such backward tracing of conclusions to their premises, these to preceding conclusions and their premises, and so on, ad infinitum. If we are to begin at all, we must begin somewhere, and that position of somewhere always is occupied by a something or somewhat which must be accepted, admitted, or assumed as a basis, and which must be taken for granted at least tentatively. This something or somewhat is usually known as the first principle of the argument, discussion or reasoning. Point 2. There can be no logical argument or discussion between persons who do not accept the same first principles, at least tentatively. Neither can there be logical reasoning on the part of the individual who does not accept some first principle, at least tentatively, in order to think intelligently on any subject whatsoever. A realization of the fact would prevent much futile argument and discussion, and much purposeless and inconclusive reasoning. Point 3. The goodness or badness of a condition, action or belief may be determined only by first agreeing upon its associated object, purpose, end or effect. It is impossible to determine whether or not a thing is good, unless we first ask and answer the question, good for what? This brings a realization that most so-called good or bad is purely relative, that what is one man's good, is another man's bad. The rain that is welcomed by farmers in one section is dreaded by those in another. A rise in the market makes some men rich, while ruining others. The point of view of the average practicing physician or undertaker must of necessity be entirely different from that of their sought-for and desired patrons. There must be an accepted standard, a stated good for this, or because of that. Point 4. The old proverb, de gustibus non estate disputandum, i.e., there is no disputing about tastes, expresses a truth which, if generally recognized, would prevent much futile argument and discussion, and save much fruitless reasoning. Without a standard, arguments of this kind are without end. To each person his own taste is a standard, in absence of the acceptance of a higher one. As a writer has said, tastes differ so much among individuals, nations, or in different ages that it is utterly impossible to set up a standard of taste applicable to all men and to all ages of society. Not only are there countless individual preferences in taste, but there are also local standards generally accepted as authoritative, and there are even passing fashions of taste in all communities. There are two general forces at work in setting standards of taste. The current standards result from a balance between these two. These two factors are, a. the numberless individual tastes caused by the temperaments, education, or associations of the different persons, and, b. the comparatively uniform standards of taste adopted or accepted by the majority of the most intelligent and cultured persons in any community at any given time. But in any case, there can be no logical discussion or argument concerning taste, unless some certain or general standard be accepted or assumed at least tentatively. Point V. Likewise, there can be no logical argument or reasoning concerning the subject of the merits or demerits of particular or general behavior, unless a definite, certain standard of conduct and behavior be accepted, adopted, admitted, or assumed at least tentatively, by the reasoning person or the parties to the argument. This standard may be the law of that time and place, the accepted common general rule of good behavior and conduct, the accepted customs of that time and place, the accepted principles of ethics of the best thought of that time and place, or the moral codes, commandments, or teachings of some particular accepted religion. The religious standards, for instance, may consist of the Ten Commandments or of Christ's two commandments or of the Golden Rule or of the Sermon on the Mount or of the teachings and rules of the Church. In other lands, this being true of the particular religions accepted and at least nominally followed by the people of the land, the legal standards are set by the respective laws of the states or countries in question. The general moral standards are represented by the customs and habits of the best part of a community. The modern ethical standards are represented by the following statement of Professor Davidson: "It is not enough for a man to understand the conditions of rational life in his own time. He must likewise love these conditions and hate whatever leads to life of an opposite kind. This is only another way of saying that he must love the good and hate the evil, for the good is simply what conduces to rational and moral life, and the evil simply what leads away from it." But, whatever may be the standard adopted, accepted or assumed, there must be some such standard, else all argument, discussion or reasoning on the subject must be futile, meaningless, and endless. Point 5. Reasoning and argument about the nature and characteristics of things in general, or in particular, should always be conducted on the basis of things as they are, rather than upon things as they ought to be. The ought to be question is quite proper in its place, but its place is some other place. It has no place in the thought concerning the nature, characteristics, and present state or conditions of the thing or things in question. A failure to observe this precautionary measure is a cause of much futile and endless discussion, and of much muddled thinking. Nature, life, society, and things in general, must first be known as they are, before any improvement or progress is possible. We must know what things are, and how they behave, before we can reason out possibly better ways. Many persons shrink from seeing things as they are in nature. They are afraid to look facts in the face. They are afraid of the naked truth, evidently considering it nice, if not, indeed, actually indecent. Your premises should be, Allah is B, or this A is a B, if such be the case, rather than Allah should be C or this A should be a C. That is, if you are arguing or reasoning about the nature of, or the truth concerning the thing in question, or of the present facts of the case, the should be or ought to be or the it is a pity that it is not, is quite another matter. Such requires a new premise, involving an entirely different line of argument or course of reasoning. In logical reasoning, the scientific spirit, not that of the sentimentalist, should govern. This is not asking too much of you. If omniscience sees and knows everything, then it must see and know things as they are. You are merely asked to endeavor to follow the same course to the best of your ability. Point 7. You will do well to realize and recognize that everything has its opposite, that there are always two sides to every question, that most statements of truth are merely half-truths, the other half being left unstated, that truth is usually discovered in the middle of the road, or to be the golden mean between the two extremes. Truth usually is found to consist of a reconciliation of the opposites or the harmonization of the two opposing, but not really contradictory, aspects of the case. In most cases it will be found that neither Allah is B, is true, but that the truth is that some A is B, and some A is not B. Consequently, when you encounter a case in which each of the two sides has many capable adherents, and each is well supported by fact and argument, you may be reasonably sure that the whole truth lies in between the two extremes, and may be found by reconciliation and a broader and deeper solution. There formerly raged a violent dispute as to whether heredity or environment is the prepotent factor in shaping character. Much was said on each side, and each side arrayed strong facts to support it. Then, along came Herbert Spencer with his deeper and broader solution that heredity is merely the results of past environment, and that present environment is merely heredity in the making. Likewise, the same gifted philosopher harmonized the old dispute between the adherents of intuition, of a certain kind, and those of experience regarded as the basis of certain universal notions. He shows that such universal notions might be called intuitive, but that this intuition originally arose from the actual experience of the race, and in time, through inheritance, become fixed in the race as necessary beliefs. All this brings us to a realization that, as a writer has said, anything may be defended by logical argument or reasoning that does not involve a logical contradiction in terms, i.e., that does not conflict with the universal laws of thought which we have presented to you in this instruction. Point 8. Much attention of late years has been given to the pragmatic aspect of things, to the aspect of practical use and utility. The pragmatic test, i.e., how will it work, what will it do, what use is it, is now being applied in every field of human thought, every branch of study, every important question of judgment and of logical reasoning. There is in the air of the times a disposition to demand of everything the answer to the great question, what of it? You will remember the 3 questions suggested by us to you in a preceding part of this instruction, viz., what is it? How do you know it? What of it? This last is the pragmatic factor. There is found a strong tendency on the part of modern writers and teachers on the art of thinking to advise that one should not waste time and effort on reasoning which leads nowhere, and which is purely academic in character, scholarly but not scientific, but should confine one's thought to practical questions admitting of definite answer and practical, useful application. A writer voices this bluntly as follows: put away from you all questions which do not admit of a definite answer, and also those of which the answers can have no practical meaning, importance, service or use to you. Henry Hazlitt states this idea with more gentleness, as follows: the pragmatic method can be applied with profit to nearly all our positive problems. Before starting to solve a question, while deciding, for instance, on the validity of some nice distinction in logic, we should ask ourselves, A. What practical difference will it make if I hold one opinion or the other? How will my belief influence my action? Using the word A, action in its broadest sense. This may often lead our line of inquiry into more fruitful channels, keep us from making fine but needless distinctions, help us to word our questions more relevantly, and lead us to make the distinctions where we really need them. Point 9. We have at different points in this instruction pointed out to you the fact that the best reasoning, the truest reasoning, is purposive reasoning. In fact, it is not too much to say that there is no real or true reasoning that is not reasoning with and for a purpose. That purpose is the discovery of truth, the answer to a particular or general question. The clearer that purpose, the more clearly understood that question, then the truer, clearer, more definite, and more effective will be the reasoning process. As Hazlitt says, we cannot think on a general principles. To try this is like attempting to chew laughing gas. To think at all requires a purpose, no matter how vague. The best thinking, moreover, requires a definite purpose, and the more definite this purpose, the more definite will be our thinking. Therefore, in taking up any special line of thought, we must find just what our end and purpose is, and thus get clearly in mind what our problems are. Our first step is to get our problem or problems in mind, and to state them as definitely as possible. A problem properly stated is a problem partly solved. Our problems necessitating our reasoning are questions demanding an answer. Our business is to clear away the non-essential elements of the question, and to reduce it to its simplest, most fundamental and basic, essential elements. You should ask yourself, just what is the nature of this question, and just what must be the nature of the answer when found? The analysis required for this reduction of the question to its simplest essential elements, and for the perception of the necessary general character of the sought-for answer, will in itself set you well on your way in your process of reasoning out that answer. Sometimes the careful examination of the opposite side will clear away much obstructing material. The analysis of the elements of the thing sought to be avoided, or of the elements of your ignorance, will often point directly and unerringly to the solution. Hegel was quite right in his doctrine that a thing can be fully known only by also fully knowing its opposite. In beginning your reasoning, carry in mind the homely aphorism of the old hunter, i.e., when you start out to hunt anything, be sure you know just what you're hunting, or else you mightn't recognize it when you run across it. Point X. The best thinkers have found an important working principle to consist of the breaking up method, i.e., the method of dividing, or breaking up the subject of thought into convenient classes, divisions, or parts, each of these being handled in turn by the mind. Logical division and analysis should be followed in the breaking up, in order that the best results may be obtained. The rule of the breaking up should be logical order, definiteness, utility. Jeremy Bentham, though not the originator of this method, was one of its most able practitioners. It has been claimed that the secret of his strength and originality of thought lay in this method. John Stuart Mill, in one of his essays, directed attention to Bentham's use of this method, of which he said, "It may be shortly described as the method of detail, of treating wholes by separating them into their parts, abstractions by resolving them into things, classes, and generalities by distinguishing them into the individuals of which they are made up, and breaking every question into pieces before attempting to solve it." Hazlitt says, "The systematic thinker is careful of the manner in which he marshals his difficulties. He knows that certain problems should properly be considered before certain others, and he saves himself labor and sometimes error by considering them in that order. Knowledge furnishes problems, and the discovery of problems itself constitutes an intellectual advance. Whenever you are thrashing out a subject, write down every problem, difficulty, and objection that occurs to you. When you get what you consider a satisfactory solution, see whether or not it answers all of them." Concluding advice: you are advised to observe the following general rules in your reasoning, arguments, and discussions. Most of these points have been referred to, or else stated, in the foregoing instruction. 1. Define and understand your principal terms, and demand the same of your opponent. 2. Be certain of the premises employed. Beware of begging the question, and of allowing your opponent to do so. 3. Proceed logically, observing the laws of thought rationally interpreted, and insist upon your opponent doing the same. 4. Avoid prejudice and unwarranted preconceived opinion, but respect your own opinions, and do not discard them unless better are obtained. 5. Understand and observe the distinction between particular judgments and universal judgments, and be on guard against confusing or confounding them, on your own part and that of your opponent. 6. Admit, and permit, nothing in the conclusion which is not involved in the premises. 7. Apply always, to yourself and to your opponent, the leading questions: what is it? How do you know it? What of it? An observance of the 10 general points set forth in the foregoing pages, and of the several general rules briefly stated above, will serve to furnish you with what a writer has expressed as an equipment of tests and requirements which would save many people from wasting their time and thought upon discussions, arguments, and reasoning, of which they realize neither the origin nor the end. The master formula in your task of attaining efficient reasoning power: you will be aided by a study and the observance of the principles of the master formula of attainment, which forms an important element of our instruction. The master formula, precisely stated, is as follows: I. Definite ideals. 2. Insistent desire. 3. Confident expectation. 4. Persistent determination. V. Balanced compensation. Reduced to popular terms, it reads: you may have anything you want, provided that you 1. Know exactly what you want. 2. Want it hard enough. 3. Confidently expect to obtain it. 4. Persistently determined to obtain it. And 5. Are willing to pay the price of its attainment.